I have a very different opinion with ADCC. I don't even think ADCC, I don't think it's necessary for them to pay athletes whatsoever. I understand what everybody talks about it, that it's this kind of event and it's blah blah blah, but it constantly gets compared to, and it has a lot of similarities to the Olympics. And the Olympics, there's trials, there's Olympic trials for sports. It's one of the toughest events in all of sporting to even get invited to, let alone win, and you get paid $0. The people who pay you are your country. That's not the case with jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is nowhere near that level where certain countries around the world would pay, three, four, $500,000 if you won an Olympic gold medal, but I don't think that they're required to really pay anybody. So
Hey everybody, it's your girl Sophia from Combat Talk Podcast, and today it's a little bit different. Everybody's been asking, who's the next interview? Who's the next interview? And you guys know that I always bring the heat for interviews, and I'm bringing the best people on my podcast. Now, this is someone for me personally that I've always wanted to talk to for jiu-jitsu wise, because he helped my game tremendously, and just studying him, and I think a lot of people feel that way. He's competed for one championship, IAGA, ADCC. You might see him at the Nogi Pans, you might have just seen him at Detroit, you might just see him sometime soon for another big match. But who am I talking about? When we talk about some of the greatest high-level grapplers right now, who do we talk about? People? Dante Leon. Yes. I got the opportunity to talk to the one, the only Dante Leon. So without further ado, I'm not going to hold you guys back. But remember to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell so you never ever miss another episode of the Combat Talk Podcast. Because you might never know what's going to happen. But without further ado, let's get into this interview. I want to get into is how you got into jiu-jitsu.
getting into jiu-jitsu, I got introduced to jiu-jitsu formally the week of my 12th birthday. It was a little bit of a combination between me being out from sports for a spring or a summer, which was atypical because I usually played spring hockey and different sports throughout the summer, especially even younger with soccer and things like that. So my mom was very against letting me kind of stay home and do nothing. So she wanted me to find something to do. And when I talked to my dad, he suggested jujitsu. And I was like, yeah, sure. Not really expecting much of it because I still wanted to focus on hockey more so. And then once I started, I really enjoyed it. And like I always tell people, once I competed is when I really liked it. So after my first competition, I kind of made up my mind that I wanted to do jujitsu.
So with you saying that, how did you really get yourself to do the IBJJFs, the ADCCs? What was that mentality that you had to get? And also, how did you make that physical change for yourself to do those competitions?
When I was a kid, the transition wasn't too difficult because I was actually technically like doing jujitsu less than I would have been playing hockey. Like playing hockey at the travel level and the AAA level was like 2 and 3 practices a week and 2 and 3 games a week for the majority of the season. And then, like I said, spring hockey was kind of like the same for 2 months when you were off school or kind of near the end of school. So like there was actually more time consuming to be at the rink as a kid than it was to go to jujitsu. To go to jujitsu was just like an hour, 2 hours in the gym, train, and then like wash up, go home. Whereas hockey, you're like you have to put on all your equipment, all this stuff. It's like a long time. You have to talk to coaches. It was a lot more time consuming, honestly, even being 8, 9, 10 years old playing hockey compared to like doing jujitsu at 12 and 13. But when I did jiu-jitsu in the area, like there weren't really IBJJF tournaments. Like IBJJF didn't really even come to the States very often outside of like a few tournaments. And I think in like 2008 to 9, they started to come to major cities and then they quickly started expanding. And by the time that they went to Chicago was the first place I remember being moderately close to where I grew up. That was the first IBJJF. So by then I'd already had 2 years of experience competing, probably like once a month. So tallying up, anywhere from like 70 to 90 tournament matches, maybe even more, between all the divisions I was doing. So by the time IBJJF came around, it was uh, it was a pretty easy transition, honestly. And it was honestly less matches. And a lot of times in the beginning, it wasn't as hard as some of the local tournaments because the local tournaments used to have like really deep brackets and really deep like you might fight the same people and over and over again, but there weren't that many tournaments. So randomly, like a tournament in January when everybody was itching to compete, it would be somewhere random in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, something like that, and it would have like 28 people in a bracket. So, it took a while before IBJJF became really popular in our area and like kind of the tougher tournaments. And then by the time ADCC Opens came around was like 2022, 2023, I want to say. Like I was like very well into my career at that point, and I've only done one of those. But for the people that are coming up now, I mean, everybody nowadays is very spoiled with the amount of tournaments that you have compared to what we had back in like the early to mid 2000s.
Now, I kind of want to play into that a little bit because you talked about the years prior. I mean, for so many years, you've been on the pedestal of like, oh my God, that's Dante Leon. Like, oh my God. Like, you're always competing at the highest level. And I remember meeting you for the first time at Nogi Pans, and it's like, I started Jiu-Jitsu 6 years ago. And I remember watching like just your matches, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I was freaking out because it's like you were one of the first grapplers I took serious. Not to like fangirl, but like your style, like I fell in love with because of how your agility was and your explosiveness and just the way that you kept going. I was like, if a girl like me can watch that, and no girls I was going with at the gym I was at for the first couple years were really never that explosive. They were never really using wrestling. So I felt like that was kind of different. That's how, especially your matches helped me. So, but when we talk about the Pedigo team and transitioning into being a full-time owner of a gym and a black belt coach, when you go to tournaments now and you're coaching, how do you separate yourself as a coach from a competitor?
Well, first off, I appreciate everything you said. I think that's very cool that we get to sit down and talk now. But to answer your question, there is a difference between coaching and competing, and it can be something that if you're not, um, if you don't prioritize your time as far as like your time to coach and your time to be a coach and 100% be a coach or your time to like 100% be a competitor, it can be super detrimental to you. Especially what I've seen is it gets super detrimental to people's performance. There's a lot of events like nowadays I compete far less frequently than I used to in the past, and it gives me more time to be available as a coach. Gives me more time to be able to sit in people's corners and have a weekend where it's all about them competing, whether it's the Pedigo guys, which, I know my guys are Pedigo, but there's a lot of events that they go to and that we go to since there's a lot of distance between us and Keith's gym, the headquarters. So there's a lot of these tournaments like the Detroit Open where we didn't really have anybody from that side of Pedigo. It was pretty well all a few guys from the Indiana area and then my gym, really. So that weekend I competed to do something to be like active before the next big match that I have coming up. And the main goal of the weekend was to be able to like coach the guys and support them and hope to evaluate and see if their performances on the mat are, you know, if we're seeing the trends going the right way between how they're training and how they're performing. So it was a good way to do that. But a lot of tournaments, I'll have to be sitting in like the coach's corner for a day or two, and then like I need to prioritize that little bit of time I have to be a competitor. So like I might have to, be a little bit selfish in times like that, but I try and do as much as I can on both sides of it.
Now, when we talk about you as a competitor, you've been able to do Who's Number One championship, all the bigger super fight platforms. For you at first, what was the first experience like going on to Who's Number One and one championship?
So like each one of them has a unique feel. There's like unique memories from all of them. I would say my first memory with like a pro card would probably be Fight to Win. And Fight to Win always had its own mystique, especially back in the day. Fight to Win used to have like all the best grapplers on there. Then from there were other events like Grapple Fest, and Grapple Fest holds like a special place in my heart as far as an event. And then Who's Number One? Like the first time I did Who's Number One, they were affiliated with Fight to Win. So that just kind of felt like almost like not to say anything bad, but it felt just like a glorified Fight to Win. It wasn't until that like Flow went on their own and they had their Who's Number One championship. That was their own kind of brand that it felt different than basically a Fight to One, I would say. Um, but it was really cool. Like each time, like I said, they're very unique and very different. But when you get into the promotions like One Championship and AIGA and ACB, um, you can fight the best guys in the world at any of the tournaments that I listed. Who's Number One has been responsible for some of the best matches in the sport and some of the best matchups in the sport. But when you get into like One Championship, AIGA, ACB, I would say those three specifically, the production quality and like the treatment and like the pre-event, just everything about it is like another level. It's extremely, extremely high level. There's no there is nothing that makes it feel like it's like a typical jiu-jitsu show or like a pro level MMA show. It feels like it's something even elevated from that. So, I mean, obviously there are a lot bigger brands and companies with some more history in other places, not just with jujitsu. So that's why I think each one of them has a really special place for me. And I see a lot of guys out there that have stuck to just like one promotion, but I think multiple promotions, being able to compete in all those different places all over the world is what's really cool and what's really unique. So like pretty much every major uh professional submission grappling or professional jiu-jitsu organization that really gained traction and had a good history, I've either competed in one on one of their shows or have like a title in one of their promotions, even ones that aren't around anymore. Like one I always talk about is Kasai. Like Kasai was such a good card. If anybody out there wants to watch like old school super fights or super fight cards, like Kasai used to put on the best ones, and they used to have in North America they used to have the best production that I've been a part of.
Now, I kind of want to play into that a little bit because a lot of the times that you're mentioned, whether it's Nogi Pans or, it's a big card that it's just you and another guy, a lot of the stuff that I see is like, oh my God, like Dante beat this guy, Dante beat this guy. For you, how do you keep the same mentality of, regardless of these guys' names, how do you just go in there and be like, okay, this is my game plan, this is what I want to accomplish in the match? How do you remain so focused and know what you're going to do in that match?
I don't think my intention or like my goal with a big match or a big tournament necessarily changes too much. I think I might have some other things that I'm maybe favoring or working on, or there's always like a little bit of a different element to each one of those. But at the end of it all, to just simply say like all of those major tournaments and matches that I go into, I'm trying to win and I'm trying to show a very good version of myself while doing that. So, the getting a win by a really lame way is not really okay to me if I'm not showing a good version or good quality jujitsu. And vice versa. If I'm showing good quality jiu-jitsu and I'm like performing really well and I don't win, it's obviously kind of a failure too. So, the goal really doesn't change. The mindset going into these things hasn't really changed for a while. Um, but the motivation just comes from there being a lot of other people out there. And I think one of the biggest things that I see now is a lot of competitors get to a very high level. They get some titles, they have great accolades, and they're obviously good grapplers. But when we look down the list of world-class athletes that they've beaten and current best in the worlds that they've gone against and beaten, the list is incomplete. And a lot of them don't have wins against other world champions. They don't have wins against historical, all-time great grapplers, Hall of Fame grapplers. And to me, when we're talking about a combat sport, which at the end of the day, jiu-jitsu is the softest combat sport by a mile, but it's still a combat sport, just like wrestling. It kind of comes down to who you've defeated. When you're talking about who are like the best people or who are the most impressive people, it's all a matter of opinion. But when everybody has world titles, when everybody has titles in all these different super fight promotions, like we were talking about, and everybody has um, pretty well comparable accolades, we start to look at who are the people that they beat. So, take for example, boxing. We look at some of the all-time greats in boxing that have 20 and 30 losses on their record, but we look at their 160 to 100 and 40 victories that they have, and they have 20 Hall of Famers in there that they've beaten. So, that to me is what is important, the quality of opponent. And I don't think in my lifetime, I don't think I'll ever run out of high quality opponents to go against. Rather than chasing just wins, like I said, I'm trying to chase some of the best people in the sport and people who go down as Hall of Famers in the sport when it's all said and done. So that really motivates me, and that's really something that I think drives me, and I don't see that going across the board with competitors in jiu-jitsu.
Now, when we kind of fast forwarding a little bit, what are the key differences you see from yourself now competition wise compared to the Dante 2 years ago when, maybe you had injuries, maybe you were low on yourself, compared to the Dante 2 years ago competing for Nogi Pans, and a lot of people are like, oh my God, like who's this new prospect? Like who's this guy? For you mentally and competition wise, what are the differences you see from yourself 2 years ago to now?
Uh, 2 years ago, if I'm to like go back, 2 years ago is right before, like this time would be kind of like right before ADCC. Every time there's a ADCC year, it's kind of ADCC or die for all high level grapplers. So I think after my performance at ADCC, I was able to stay busy, and then I was able to get to a place in my career that I put a lot of work in to get to. And for the last 2 years, I've been enjoying that process and trying to make the most of it. And that's to be um, what I always said was a prize fighter. And that was always my dream as a kid. I always wanted to be a prize fighter. I always wanted to be somebody who could like get to travel around the world and compete and be paid for what they do, and be paid well for their sport, for their field, and build a life for myself and build a plan that I can retire on. Essentially, I don't think I'm close to retirement by any means, but I'm building a nice foundation for myself and hopefully a family in the future. So this is where all the work has gone to become. Um, through all of that, it's tough to keep your same aggression, hunger kind of edge that I like to call it that you have earlier on. But even 2 years ago, I think I had matured a little bit and became a little bit different, and quickly molded into the person I am in this situation today. So like today, I feel like I'm a better grappler and I'm a better competitor. I obviously don't have things I'm trying to prove externally. I just have goals that I've set for myself. many of which I've accomplished, but many of which I have not. So I obviously still have hunger and I still have an edge to me to complete those things. And the funny part is once those things are completed, I'll probably just find more stuff to want to do or something else as a challenge to want to do. And when jujitsu's all done for me and it's kind of like the end of the road as far as the athletic career and my competitive career, I'll find new things to kind of like challenge myself or push myself towards, and they might not be involved with jujitsu whatsoever. So I think because of that and that characteristic that I have there with constantly trying to like evolve and looking at my life and being honest about it and looking at the improvements that I think I need to make, the challenges that I can put out for myself that are not astronomical, but they're also not small goals either. I think continuing to do those things, I think that's just part of who I am and who I've always been as a person, as an athlete, as a competitor. And even when I'm not a competitor or an athlete, I think it's just so in my fabric that it's something that I'll always have. So, I'm not like the most uber competitive guy when it comes to playing like a board game or something, but if I find an activity that I like to do, I'm going to try and get good at it, and not be competitive or egotistical, but I'm going to be very nerdy and I'm going to study about it and I'm going to try and get good at it. I'm going to train a lot and work really hard and, put not pressure on myself, but put a little higher expectation on myself. So, I think that is with what you were saying. I think that's what's kind of tying in the last two things we talked about. I think that's what's propelled me to go through all these different stages of my career to knock down goals that I had set, and then at the same time be able to evaluate and reassess where we could take this whole thing.
Now, to play into a different part, you talk about Westside Barbell and you talk about how much that's impacted your life. And a lot of athletes today, weightlifting is so important to a lot of people. For you, how did that come into your life and why is that such a big, important part of you as a person and as a competitor?
So as a I found weightlifting through my father. And I was introduced to weightlifting in the gym from a young age, even younger than when I was introduced to jiu-jitsu. Dad took me to the gym, kind of told me how to work out, showed me how to do certain exercises, and I basically spent a summer going to the gym 4 times a week. Very, really like rudimentary type lifting and training, but I was introduced to it. And then my dad never really took me to the gym again. But I was a huge bodybuilding fan. I was a huge powerlifting fan. I really just like studied and just really, really liked the sport. Very, very like nerdy in a sense almost. I feel like today when you see people who are bodybuilding fans or gym fans, they're following a lot of influencers and obviously didn't have as much of that growing up. So a lot of what I did was read old magazines and ask my parents for subscriptions or like go to the local bookstore and pick up like Flex magazine. Look through all the old magazines that my dad had, the Powerlifting USA and things like that. And even back in some of the 80s issues, you would see some of these names that I really wasn't super familiar with until I moved to Ohio. And then when I moved to Ohio, everybody who does strength training almost all over the world knows Westside Barbell and Louis Simmons in some fashion, has some kind of influence from them in a way. But if you're from Ohio, it's almost like it's dyed in the wool here because Columbus is the capital of our state. That's where Westside Barbell was. And um, so when they looking around and studying for a strength program in jiu-jitsu that didn't pack on size or muscle in a horrible way that was I was able to control recovery and I was able to control my volume. Really landed on Westside Barbell's methods, followed them for probably over 10 years now, I would say. And then, after like building myself up and being connected with some people at Westside through training and through communications, I was able to get a day to go into the gym and train at Westside. So from there, the relationship kind of like built. And now they are really like the heart and soul of my strength and conditioning. They're the heart and soul of my entire teams and other training partners, strength and conditioning, and they've had a huge influence on me.
Now, one of the last questions I want to ask, and you can say no to this too. For you, when we talk about being paid in jiu-jitsu, we talk about ADCC might not always get you all the money. CGI is going to get you 1 million. For you, what do you really want to see happening with getting paid in jiu-jitsu? What do you hope happens within the next year or 5 years?
If we could all make $1 million to grapple, that'd be great. But I mean, we have to be a little bit excuse me, realistic about these things. I have a very different opinion with ADCC. I don't even think ADCC, I don't think it's necessary for them to pay athletes whatsoever. I understand what everybody talks about it, that it's this kind of event and it's blah blah blah, but it constantly gets compared to, and it has a lot of similarities to the Olympics. And the Olympics, there's trials, there's Olympic trials for sports. It's one of the toughest events in all of sporting to even get invited to, let alone win, and you get paid $0. The people who pay you are your country. That's not the case with jujitsu. Jujitsu is nowhere near that level where certain countries around the world would pay, three, four, $500,000 if you won an Olympic gold medal, but I don't think that they're required to really pay anybody. So whatever money we're getting from ADCC, I'm appreciative. I understand the narrative with people that say, the people that started ADCC basically, they have money trees. I get it, but that doesn't just necessarily mean that you just get money or that they should hand you over more money just because. I mean, that's not the way the world works. So yeah, I have a very different opinion with ADCC compared to most people. And I understand people's frustration with these events like ADCC, with some other events that pay is not very high or where there's tournaments and different things like that. And I also see that things get very askew when you look at, ADCC was $10,000 for maybe probably four of the toughest matches of your life. I've been to day two multiple times at ADCC, and I've had a lot of matches at a lot of events, and it is the toughest tournament that there is for sure. And when you map out you're making 10 grand and how much a lot of people can make from one match anywhere else, it starts to really lose its it starts to really lose its romance there. It starts to really lose its beauty when people are looking at it just about the money. But the title is what it is, the title is what you want. So, enough about that. But what I would like to see happen with jiu-jitsu is I would like to see the pay overall go up. It's very easy for me to talk about it when I'm at the upper tier of the sport where I'm fighting on some of the biggest cards and in the biggest promotions. Things are always going to be good for people like that. We'll always get paid a decent amount of money to have matches, and we have the ability to be, under contract and have these different things and these different kind of pay increases that really work out for us. But there's a lot of really good grapplers in that top 10, top 15, top 20 area that are really struggling to get paid for these matches and get paid to show up and entertain a large number of fans like some of the top five guys in the world are. So because of that, I would like to see it kind of go across the board a little more. I would like to see it be a little more liberal with how it is and how the shows and the money is being spent. Now, again, unlike a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, I don't have the answer to how that could work and how that could happen, but I know we all know and we all see out there that a lot of these events could happen, And I think at the same time, on the other side, I think that jiu-jitsu athletes are to blame just as much as promotions and just as much as anybody. I see so many jiu-jitsu athletes that don't want to go out and compete and they don't want to challenge themselves and they're hanging on to something and they price themselves out of the market. I mean, it's it's really silly. I think a lot of jiu-jitsu guys could afford to swallow their egos, maybe take a little cheaper of a payday and work their way up to the point that in another 2, 3 years they're making legit money. And it'd be nice to see, at the end of your career when your skill is the highest and your experience is the highest, you can make a couple of really nice paydays and ride off into the sunset, enjoy the jiu-jitsu retirement.
So now my last question, me being from the Midwest, I'm in Indiana. For you, a lot of people when we talk about the Midwest grapplers, I have my own opinion. I think they're some of the hardest grapplers. I think you guys are just some of like the most charismatic. You're about going and getting it. In your own opinion, what do you think makes the Midwest grapplers different from, the guys in LA and New York and in Texas?
Uh, I think when you compare, I think it's a couple things. I think people in the Midwest are tougher overall, just because I think that it's it's middle America, it's middle class, it's blue collar. A lot more of that is prevalent here. Um, when you talk about other places like Texas, New York, LA, the West Coast, a lot of their culture is predominantly uh, middle class and blue collar as well. That doesn't mean that you live in those places that you're just like raised, on the silver spoon and you have less struggle than people from the Midwest. I mean, we obviously all have pretty decent lives out this way, but I think the biggest thing that changes is the weather and the scenery. And I think that really like plays a role in the whole thing. I think the diversity of the Midwest, uh, there's a lot of like upper class, there's a lot of middle class, there's a lot of lower middle class, and then there's a lot of really, really rough areas throughout the Midwest. And it kind of goes across the board. There's a lot of dangerous places, there's a lot of like really, really nice places. There's the best and the worst of America all in this like little 3 or 4 state region in the country. And even though that's not like the greatest selling point to try and sell somebody a house, to try and entice somebody to move somewhere, the diversity and the culture and the mix of people's ability here, I think they really it's rare that a lot of people from the Midwest, I mean, nowadays it's more prevalent, but it's rare that people who grow up in the Midwest flee to California or to Texas or things like that. There are quite a few these days, but there's a lot of people that stay home. So you have a lot of diversity. You have a lot of people who are very patriotic and really embrace where they came from and embrace the fact that they are a little bit different, or maybe they're not really that different. They're just boring as all get out, like everybody thinks the Midwest is. So I think you have very prideful, very tough people. And with that being said, I think very prideful and tough people you can see in a lot of other places. But when jiu-jitsu came out, it was not for, it wasn't for poor people. It wasn't even for middle class people. It was for rich people. That's how jiu-jitsu came about. And when jiu-jitsu first spread in the United States, it spread to the nicest areas of the United States. Nobody came to teach like rich people in Toledo, Ohio. That wasn't like the first place that they stopped. It just jujitsu's ended up in not every, but so many different communities and so many different regions of this country just because people realize how incredible of a sport and martial art it is. But when it first came out, it was in the nice areas of California and Florida. Eventually, it made it out to the East Coast and New York, but it was always around those nice areas. So the people the people there were always a little bit spoiled and far ahead of us with jujitsu. But once it made it to these other regions, I think we caught up very quickly. And I think now we're seeing that with other places around the world. If anybody does a little bit of digging, you'll see that Australia is one of the craziest, most talent dense places on the planet. Poland is surging at the moment. Russia, Dagestan, Russia, Chechnya, these these guys are surging as grapplers. Like people don't really experience it yet because a lot of these people have travel bans and visa issues and they got to travel a million miles just to come and do a random tournament. It's not the same for us. So, it's surging all around the world. In Poland, you have very tough, resilient people. Russia, you have the same thing, people that have a huge history of grappling already. And then you go to Australia and you never thought of Australia as a grappling state, but you look at their success in combat sports like kickboxing and Muay Thai. They were some of the first to go to Thailand and eventually win and dominate some of the tougher fighters in tournaments. As far as grappling goes, we look at the UFC. There's been a lot of good grapplers and good wrestlers that are Australian in the UFC, and now we're seeing it. It's not just Craig Jones and Levi. There's plenty of other Australian grapplers that are coming up through the ranks and that are at the black belt ranks now and that are dominating. So, it's not just the Midwest, it's all throughout the world. And I always tell people just thank yourself that you're in a sport that you don't have to compete against China and other places like that, because when these countries get involved, we're going to see like a whole new dynamic side of jiu-jitsu and just, you know, hopefully seeing the talent spread and seeing its popularity spread to the places that it isn't already. I think will elevate the level even more. And this is what has happened in other sports that are quite a bit older than ours. Boxing for a long time was dominated by the English, was dominated by Americans. Now you fast forward a great while, and Hispanic fighters were dominating. Nowadays, Eastern European fighters are dominating. African fighters are dominating. Australian boxers, up until recently, there was tons of Australian boxers that were on top of the world. So you see, it changes where this talent is coming from. And nowadays, you see a lot of Chinese, Japanese boxers that are some of the best in the world, which even 20 years ago you would never expect. So it'll be cool to see where the sport ends up. And I think the Midwest was one of the first places in America to really surprise the jiu-jitsu public in the early 2000s.
Now, last thing before I let you go, what is that advice you give to younger athletes, the men and the women, that if they want to be in a position where you're at, where they can compete for IAGA, CGI one championship, who's number one, the ADCC championships, what do you tell those athletes?
I tell these young kids that they should have fun and enjoy this, and I try and make it as fun as it can. I'm 31 years old, and I'm training more and on a more strict and more regimented training cycle than I've ever been in my entire life. And I'm almost 20 years into doing jujitsu. So, if at 13, 14, 15, 16, you're not having fun and you're not still feeling like a young teen or a young kid, and in your young adult years, you're still not feeling, you're not going to be able to do everything that young kids and young adults do. But if you're not able to be like a young adult and have that ability to have fun and enjoy things outside of the sport, there's no way you're going to stick with it 15 years. And if you do, you're going to be miserable. So, the good part is that you enjoy it, you have fun, and you immerse yourself in it for sure. If you do enjoy it and you do like it, immerse yourself in it. Study the history, look up old champions of the sport. It's always frustrating to me when I see a lot of young people in the sport who don't know who certain people are. When I walk past people at a tournament, I'm like, do you know who that guy is? And they don't know who he is, or like to me as a kid, that was never me. I was always like the nerdy guy who was walking around tournaments and telling my dad, hey, that's this guy and this is that guy, and I think he could win this or that. So immerse yourself in the sport, learn as much as you can, involve yourself as much as you can, really have fun and enjoy it because your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your ability to be a good person and a human outside of jiu-jitsu is going to be really important because if you're lacking on those things, it's going to be really, really hard and damn I say impossible to get to where I'm at 15, 16 years down the line from, the 14-year-old kid I was.
No, I appreciate your time. It means everything. So you're all set. So you're good,
Cool.
man.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Dante. I know I had a good time talking to him. It's probably one of the interviews that I've always wanted to do for the longest time. And I've had the pleasure of meeting him and talking to him myself. But now you guys get to hear more about his story, about the things he thinks about, and some of his hot takes. So go follow him on social media and stay tuned, because he's got a big match coming up soon. But I'm not going to spoil anything. So you might as well wait and see. But remember to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell so you never ever miss another episode. But as always, I'm your host, Sophia. And remember to go get that merch on the merch link in the bio of the video. And go comment in the chat and the comments. Go comment what you liked about the interview. Say hi, say what's up. Tell me who you want me to interview next and what you want me to talk about next. Because I'm always curious what you guys got to say. So for now, I'll see you guys soon. But for now, bye guys.